Okay. So thank you for your time, and I'm really happy that you're here. It's such a pleasure talking to you, and I was eager to talk to you, especially because you are involved in so many topics I'm personally interested in, and you have such a rich experience studying anticipatory processes, civilizational and technological development, your links to aesthetics. So without further introduction, if you allow me to already jump into the interview, and among all the topics you already discussed as a sort of polymath, I'm curious, what are you currently working on? What is currently occupying your time and your thought process?
I am really finishing, after almost 3 years, this book on disrupt science. I don't know whether I send you the description. Probably I did send you a one-pager description of what the book is about. So that is my main focus. I would like to get this book out as soon as possible. On the other hand, I fell for something that I did not plan to do. Some of the people who are publishing Leonardo, I assume you are familiar with a journal called Leonardo?
No, actually not.
Okay. There is a journal called Leonardo that writes a lot about the intersection between art and technology. And one of my good friends from Germany, Frieder Nacke, who was involved in the beginnings of what is called computer art, brought up some subjects. So in short, I was asked to review something, and instead of only reviewing something, I ended up writing a whole article on what is happening now due to the artificial intelligence big discussion and whatever they are making available. So I did not plan to do this text, but it took me in, and so I'm finishing that text as well.
Coming back to what you said with disrupt science,
Yeah.
you did indeed send me a little abstract. That's true, or extract. What do you mean with disrupt science? Is it really the focus on getting rid of this deterministic approach that is so prevalent and predominant in science? Or...
No, I'm not arguing in favor of getting rid of it.
Okay.
I consider that it is an incomplete representation of reality, and that we need to complete it. And instead of continuing to push with the idea that everything can be reduced to physics, like that's what the science is doing in nowadays, to realize that no, the living part cannot be reduced to physics, period. Not only that, the living part is much more complex than what physics is covering. The whole universe is by many orders of magnitude less complex, not only less complex, less intriguing than one cell, in one living cell. And that's something that science did not want to understand. On the contrary, there was a huge attack in the 19th and 20th century against a so-called vitalist who claimed that, the living is different and there are some forces in the living that we have to agree and accept. It is really time to understand that physics is a particular case of the living and not the other way around. The living is a particular case of physics.
Yeah, you mentioned to me that you see or you regard anticipatory processes as a definitory for life itself.
Yeah.
Are we already touching that subject with anticipation?
I couldn't understand your question.
I mean that the disregard for anticipatory processes in many forms of science, that is also an issue in that regard, which you are criticizing?
I'm not criticizing, I'm taking note of the fact that within determinism, the cause is in the past, period. And for the majority of the phenomena that we are familiar with, indeed, that is the case. That is the dominant form of causality as we encounter it in the world in which we live. However, causality is much richer than past and present. Causality extends to possible futures, and the living is really animated by the possible future, not as much as the falling of a stone, in which past position tells you how the next position is going to be when you're going to fall. In respect to the living, the future position is the one that determines what is happening to that living.
My personal impression is over recent years, I've seen an increasing amount of the use of futures or anticipation, but in a weird context, and so far that a few years ago, almost nobody seemed to really talk about it. And now everyone seems to use futures and anticipation, but in that regard that they really want to know what the future might be. And they want to be very specific in their delivery of these goals to tell what the future is. That's an abstract notion of what the futures as a possibility and potentiality are, right? I mean, that's again to loop back into the deterministic approach, but that would itself not really serve the notion of anticipatory processes, because it is not really about determining what the future is.
No.
I'm not saying that you are doing it. I think with your recent email, you also pointed out that this is a problem, right?
It is a definite problem, but one of my favorite examples for many years is to compare the falling of a stone to the falling of a cat. For the stone, the falling does not involve any choice. For the cat, the falling involves choices. The cat is not falling like a stone. The cat is falling under the imperative of not getting hurt, of not losing its life. So that possible future is very concrete for that cat. It's concrete to the extent that if I don't make it, I can get hurt. Under circumstances, I can even get to lose my life. This possible future is for you and me a reality of everything we do without being aware of it. It's an autonomic thing. You're not going to put your hand on a hot plate. That is a possible future in which you can get hurt, you can get burned. That possible future is not a calculation. The probability that I can get burned, no, has nothing to do with probability. Probability has something to do with determinism, in which we know how to generalize from a previous experience to a new experience. In the domain of the anticipation, what comes to expression is the possibility. And the possibility that you're going to put your hand on a hot plate is really low. Why? Because in your expression of life, you don't decide to hurt yourself. Sure, if you decide to commit suicide, that is not an example of anticipation. That is an example of in which you let yourself in the arms of determinism. I'm going to fall and that's it. Hey, goodbye. Like anything else. But except for these extreme cases, such as I said, suicidal activity, what guides us all the time is the preservation of life. And preservation of life is the concreteness, the realization of a possible future.
I like the example with the cat and the stone. I was just thinking when you mentioned it, like it probably also depends how much the owner was feeding the cat in regard of the potential to basically be malleable in the process of falling and to be flexible and adaptable. That was just a weird thought that popped up. I'm interested in you mentioned, for instance, also that the epistemological cocoon in which science is in, that it's I mean the whole Einstein notion that you can't solve a problem with the same type of thinking with which you created the problem. So I was wondering, also coming back to what you already said, what would be the epistemological therapy we basically need to begin to rethink and approach our knowledge making and knowledge creation differently?
That is really, you know, going to almost to the crux of the matter. Epistemologically, we are at this moment captive to a premise that informs our attempt to know things that is an incomplete premise. And it's like, you know, you put on some glasses and you're going to see the reality through those glasses. So epistemologically, we need to get rid of these glasses of the Cartesian revolution and really start looking at reality without preconceived ideas. The amazing thing is we're inheriting an absolutely fabulous rational way of describing part of reality, but instead of letting it, you know, be a comprehensive view, we decided we are going to stay with a limited view. So epistemologically, we are captive to an attempt to introduce rationality instead of saying there is more to rationality than what the Cartesian revolution is offering us.
So some kind of answer would be scientific pluralism. Do I hear that right?
I'm not sure that that's what I'm saying, because my problem is not with pluralism or not. My problem is with changing the premise, changing where we start from. If we start from being captive to only the deterministic description, then we are going to describe only part of reality. If we want to describe the entire reality, we have to extend this understanding.
But we do have this species-specific type of perception, and also like seemingly always falling into particular type of traps in our way of thinking. I'm just thinking, like, even if we use words like synthesis or paradox to get out of the dialectic form of thinking, what would that even be? Like, how could we think in synthesis and paradox to avoid always falling into those reductionistic traps?
Paradox and synthesis are for me two different domains, and you know, they are leading into two different views. Paradox is the result of a description of reality in which the outcome is unexpectedly valid in more than one way. That would be the paradox. But that's not where, in my opinion, we are. We are at the moment when we need to understand that to make the next step, we have to get rid of the view that there is one cause and effect, and accept that there is always a plurality of causes at work. And this plurality of causes is what's the part that we're missing. If you go to the doctor and the doctor prescribes to you a pill because you have a headache, the deterministic view is you take the pill and the headache is gone. It's exactly the same way in which the hammer works. You take the hammer in order to hit a nail, and once you did it, goodbye. It just happens that the pill that you're going to take is maybe alleviating your headache, but it can trigger a whole lot of other phenomena. And in some cases, it will not even alleviate your headache. Why? And here is the fundamental difference. As opposed to the physical, in which all the components are the same, all the electrons in the world are the same, all the molecules as we know them defined in physics are the same. In the living, there is not one cell that is the same. There is no sameness in the living, period. It's a never-ending variety as the cells are regenerating themselves continuously, okay? The new generation of cells are always different from what they will replace. That is an amazing realization that nobody is willing to cope with. It is easier to deal with things that are the same. That's why we build machines. The machine is going to function the same way. If it's not going to function the same way, you go to the mechanic and you ask him, why is my machine behaving the way it's supposed to behave? With a human being, nothing can be in the same position of behaving the same way. I hope that you understand what I'm saying to you. The physical can be defined as having a dynamics, in other words, changing according to things that we can describe through what we call laws, yeah, such as gravity. And there is no exception, whether you're black or blue, whether the stone is round or not round, whether whatever you name it, gravity is the same, period, amen, finished, yeah? In the human being, there are no two cells that are the same. Once you realize this distinction, you realize that you are asking the wrong questions when you go to the doctor and say, I have a headache, and you expect him to give you the right pill. There is no such thing. We are creating averages that might apply to you and to your neighbor, but not to the next house, where there are people who, if they take that pill, it might be fatal to them.
Yeah, I try to comprehend it. It's just also, I mean, conceptually, it's kind of quite challenging to get to approximate what that might mean. Also, if you begin to translate it into science, into society, into our form of governance, obviously a lot of things would need to change. But how do we avoid? How do we begin to design those kind of qualities other than I remember you said something like anticipation adequacy remains a matter of validation through experience. So but how do we design something better than saying to each other, I told you so? You know what I mean? So
it's a very intriguing question. It really is an intriguing question, because even if I told you so, in the end, your action will define your expression. I can tell you whatever I want, and I am often in the position. I was walking Saturday with my wife, and my wife unfortunately fell. My first instinct was, I told you what? doesn't matter what I told you. What matters is to create the awareness of your survival, your well-being depends upon actions that some of them you are aware of and others which are autonomic actions. Yeah. Try to bring into awareness as much as possible. You're never going to cover the entire area. You're always going to cover part of it. But if the awareness is increasing, you can count on a more optimal expression of anticipation. I explained sometimes to my students many, many years ago when we tried to develop some games for people aging to help them in the process of maintaining anticipatory characteristics. I explained to them that during our lifetime, more or less, we're going to fall around 400 times. And you look at babies falling, and there is no big deal. Nothing breaks. They are as elastic as you name it. Yeah. The beautiful thing with us is that during our lives, most of the time, we know, quote unquote, how to fall. In other words, there is in our participation in the fall a component that allows us to fall in a way that will prevent breaking. And then as we lose anticipatory characteristics, we don't fall anymore the right way and we start breaking bones. The first idea, which is the idea of the physics, we break bones because the bones are getting weaker. My answer is no. We break bones because we don't know how to fall the right way. So we can do something to maintain the awareness of falling the right way. We can train it. Anticipatory characteristics can be trained. Anticipation is, in the end, expressed in behavior. Anything that can be affected by behavior can be influenced by some decisions that we make or by learning. The source of anticipation from the smallest level to the more complicated level is learning, period. And that's why I'm pretty, fanatic about we need to change our understanding of learning.
So throughout your career, you obviously used as a polymath the power of the question or the question mark quite a lot. And you just mentioned learning as a way to anticipate. But what kind of learning do we need to get out of the, I don't know, very heady form of thinking about our problems, or those conceptual theoretical forms, while we neglect, as you also would probably say, the fundamental livingness of life itself. But I guess my question would be, what else is there to ask better questions?
In a way, what you just said would be an answer that I can live with very happily. But questions can be asked in many forms. They do not have to be asked only in verbal form, like I'm asking you, you are asking me a question. The questions can be asked in the form of challenges. What would you do in order to move this from here to there? What would you do in order to accomplish this or that goal? So questions can be embodied in actions. So my idea is, or my ideal form of teaching is a teaching that is engaging people. I'm totally opposed to discursive teaching and learning. I'm very much fanatic about integrating the learner and the learning in a process.
Yeah, I heard you in another interview saying that you are a big fan of interaction or interactive design.
Yeah.
So would that be a component necessary to design more interaction, more interactive experiences?
Anticipation comes to expression only because there is interaction. The interaction between two stones that are, let's say, on this desk of mine, stone A and stone B. The interaction is of a passive level, more or less according to the gravity, to Newton's model, in which the mass of the stone A and the mass of the stone B and the distance, blah, blah, blah. You probably know the equation because I assume that you took a decent class in physics. The interaction when it comes to the living is of a total different nature. It is an interaction that is open-ended and which has a dynamic. It continues over time. The interaction of the two stones is practically the same. It's constant. The interaction in the living is dynamic.
The question of taking a proper physics class is one question, but if I was paying attention, is probably another one. And I remember that you also wrote a paper that minds can only be understood in relation to each other. And so the whole interactive process is, what if I create interactive experiences, but no one cares? Like for
then I failed, period. You need to create them in a manner in which there is no such thing as no one cares. And if you find out, hey, I had the best intentions, but this interaction did not occur, did not emerge, then you did not create the right interaction, period. It's as simple as it is.
But if you observe a lot of phenomena in our social media society, you could get the impression that a lot of things that go viral are not really useful or sometimes even harmful, while the circles among those who attempt to put a lot of time and effort into creating something that might be meaningful seemingly is small, or maybe I'm just operating in a kind of niche by itself. But would you share this experience or this observation, that it's not necessarily?
But I have to make you aware of the following. For a very long time, I argued against centralized forms of communication. I argued against mass media. I was hoping that in the age of the digital, we're going to get rid of centralization. It turns out not only that we did not get rid of it, it became worse. Because mass media before the digital was limited, if you want, to what your antenna from the TV station, radio station could reach. So the digital, your antenna is now reaching the whole world. So instead of centers of interaction, we are now having an integrated centralized form. And it's a shame because a machine, which is the algorithm, is controlling human beings supposed to behave also like machines. And if they don't, they get canceled. What else should I tell you? It is the victory of determinism against the odds. I was hoping that determinism will get a beating to the digital, and I was wrong. I was proven wrong on this one. My optimism, my hope, my infinite hope failed, period. There's nothing else I can say. You know, I wrote this book that very few people read from A to Z. Some people read here and there, the Civilization of Illiteracy, in which I was describing the possibility of a world of many, many, many literacies and many, many interactions in which the control is down at the level of the individual and not up at the level of who owns the presses today, who owns the servers. Instead of the presses, now we have the servers. Nothing changed.
So, yeah, well, this is devastating a little bit, but at least maybe what we could learn from that. How did you improve your so-called bullshit radar throughout your career? How did you fine-tune it? Do you think you were able to fine-tune it nowadays? I mean, throughout all your research? Like when you point out that this is not a good sign and you were arguing against it or in favor of a different form of digital infrastructure, but you can see that it didn't turn out to be true, so your idealism was disappointed.
Yeah, that goes, you know, directly to when it hurts. Imagine you build a beautiful house, you are convinced that everybody in the house will be happy, etc., and it turns out that you are wrong. What you build is an environment for people hating each other and undermining each other, etc. Then it's not easy to live with it. On the other hand, it forced me to say, okay, where did I go wrong? And I went wrong in assuming at that time, which is many years back now, okay, that we will transcend the model imposed by the machine model, yeah? We will be able to free ourselves from the machine restrictions. It turns out I was wrong, not because I was optimistic. I was wrong because whatever I was arguing for could not succeed within a society that is totally in love with a capitalist way of living. You know, I'm meeting people who, when I met people in my life who are the most fascinating people you can imagine, and who will give you beautiful principles. And then I will ask a very simple question. How much money do you take for your research from the military? And the discussion would come to an end. Not because I think that this is, you know, poison money or dirty money. I was just curious. If your principles are peace and a better world, you cannot be, you know, paid in order to do exactly the opposite. And if you do, means that you give up your principles. Very few people from among those who I call my friends can say with their hands on their heart, I kept my hands clean. It's not enough to keep your hands clean. You have to do more than that. You have to, you know, argue in favor of the principle in which you believe. When I look at this Greta Thunberg, who is arguing in front of the ecology, only in order to profit from an exposure to a world in which her exposure is dirtying the world, period. You know, there is a lot of electricity spent in supporting her performance because she wants the attention of the world. You do something, then do it consistently and be faithful to the principles, period. Your place is not in Davos. Your place is convincing people that, hey, if I have 2 dogs, huge dogs, as she does, yeah, which is the thing that always goes to my nerve, and you're talking about ecology, the carbon footprint of your 2 dogs is larger than the carbon footprint of people living in Africa and barely surviving. Come on, you cannot play the game like this. Tough call. But you realize that I have a certain level of frustration, but doesn't mean that I'm less optimistic than I used to be. I'm not inclined to, give in the notion everything is worse. I discovered the principle, which I should publish one of these days. It's a very simple principle. If you want to find out whether you are getting old or not, find out whether you look at the past and you think it's better than the present. If that's your idea that the past was better, boy, you're getting really old. Period. There's nothing that can save you.
I personally don't mind the expression and the articulation of frustration. I think frustration can fuel a lot of fury in writing and in thinking. So I appreciate that when you point that out. So if you consider like what you just said, the maybe also the lack of intergenerational learning from each other, like from the rich experiences, and also from the maybe the naivety and willingness to do something without actually having the equipment of proper skills and knowledge, sets of knowledge from younger generations. Like, how can we mix that up? How can we because that's what I've experienced as well, like already younger generation, because now I seem to be in the middle. Younger generations often don't seem to ask the questions that could actually enrich them with insights that my generation or other generations could provide. That's how I sometimes feel like, how do we get a better understanding for each other in generational terms?
You're getting old, man. You're getting old. I feel for you. The younger
happens to everyone. I heard.
The younger generation has its own questions, whether we like them or not, whether they seem relevant or not. The younger generation is no less than you and me, animated and motivated by surviving and continuing. It's part of the, being alive. The fact that their questions are quite dissimilar from your questions or mine does not mean that their questions are less relevant. For us, this is a signal. Hey, you start losing the understanding for what's relevant. You think that you are relevant. Hey, pay a little attention to what seems relevant to the coming generation. There's no way to look at that generation with less than the understanding that they don't want to die. They don't want to sacrifice their life. They have a right to their own life, and they want to define their own life, whatever that means. Yeah? Okay? Going now back to your question. To engage generations is a very difficult task, especially since we're not coming clean as a generation. We're coming with our own motivations. A generation is at this moment defined not only by age also, but by the power accumulated within a society. You have a power that those younger than you don't have yet. I have a power that you don't have. Are you willing to give it up in order to make possible the dialogue? If you are, then the dialogue will take place.
I think we are coming to an end, because I only have a free account anyway, so the time is almost up. But I appreciate your time and your insights so much. It was lovely to talk to you, indeed.
Good. Lieber Herr, ich wünsche alles Gute. Bis demnächst.